Strange reports and unsettling mid-to-life stories whispered from the edges of dreams. So find somewhere comfortable. Dim the lights. Let the noise of the world fade away. And now let us begin the story of SCP-722, the Dreaming Worm. A black chamber, almost perfectly square, jolted against the broken ribs of rusted rails. No seams, no cracks, no hinges. Just a surface that swallowed light, a darkness too complete to be natural. The workers touched it with hesitant hands and drew back at once, shivering. Later they tried tools, blades, saws, drills. No scrape, no spark, no echo. The thing accepted their effort in silence, drank it down, and gave back nothing. That night, when the crew slept in their motel rooms, the dreams came. They dreamed of warm and liquid white, of a red interior, where shapes floated and stirred. They dreamed of a voice too low to be speech, a hum that rattled gently in their bones. They dreamed they were breathing in unison with something larger, something unseen, and when they woke, their pillows were wet with tears. They could not explain. The next morning, one of them refused to return to the site. He left town with his bag half packed, his car swerving on the highway, as though chased. Another, a woman with a braid tucked down the back of her jacket, sat quietly on the hospital steps, hands folded as if in prayer. She said nothing, only smiled faintly, like someone listening to music. By the third day, the foundation had arrived. The old hospital was called the Cradle. No one remembered it had given it that name, but it clung stubbornly. In every local town, it was a maternity institute once, where children had been delivered into the world, where cries once echoed down corridors that now lay hollow. For decades it stood empty, a skeleton of concrete and steel by the edge of a half-finished reservoir. Trees grew right up to its walls, but never touched them, as if the forest itself kept a respectful distance. The demolition crew had been told the building was unsafe, the ground unstable. They checked about ghosts of mothers and crying infants, their voices too loud in the stillness, their laughter then. On the second day of work, the machine stuttered. Excavators shook when their buckets bit into the foundation of the north wing. The metal did not clang as it should. It vibrated, deep, resonant, like a tuning fork pressed into flesh. When the dust cleared, they saw it. A tube, blacker than basalt, sitting askew in a hollow pocket of the sub-basement. Its edges were smooth, its surface perfect. The headlamps flickered when turned toward it, as if the light itself resisted, dimming to a faint glow swallowed in the dark. It's a vault, someone whispered. Another muttered, no, it's a dream. The woman with the braid, Carla, leaned against her during her lunch. Braid. She felt the faintest vibration pass into her spine. It wasn't sound, not exactly, but something below hearing, something her body understood without permission. She closed her eyes and felt a wave of calm, a soft weightlessness, a memory she did not own. For a moment she was floating in warmth, and all around her were heartbeats that were not her own. That night, the crew did not rest. Each of them dreamed the same dream. They saw a chamber not made of stone, but of flesh, cold and wet. Its was pulsing faintly. Shapes floated in the dark liquid, cold and twitching. And from somewhere beyond came a lullaby, layered and low, to many voices overlapping. The next morning, one worker was found wandering barefoot through the hospital halls, eyes closed and full against her chest. She did not speak. By the fourth day, strangers arrived. Polite, quiet men in dark suits, bits to clean, smiles to even. They thanked the workers. They asked them to sign papers. They said everything will be handled, everything will be safe. The workers left with confusion pressing against the backs of their heads, yawning constantly, unable to shake the feeling of drowsy sadness. The black chamber was taken away under the cover of steel crates and, full stories, the townsfolk were told of a chemical hazard, of contamination. They nodded, but at night they lay awake, wondering why the silence felt heavier than before. And in the weeks that followed, those who had once worked to know. Cradle reported strangely. They dreamed of breathing in time with something vast, unseen. They dreamed of lullabies they could not hum in the morning. And that they tried to dismiss it, none could shake the feeling that the silence itself was watching them. They moved the chamber as if moving a sleeping child, hush around them. Wheels, gloved hands without chatter, acquired a clear note only out. People put out sound. Even the lights along the ceiling seemed to dim themselves as the grey passed beneath, as if brightness could bruise whatever rested. Within, the freight door sat shut. Air felt heavy and kind, like a warm blanket taken from a dryer and draped across the shoulders. The room they chose for it had been prepared with care that wanted to look like routine. Thick walls, layer materials, a track of floor polished to a towel. Hospital glass. The chamber sat in the middle, neither large nor small, yet every other object in the hall seemed to orbit it without permission. The technicians and researchers walked a little slower here. They left their coffee at the threshold without speaking about why. No one ran. No one raised a voice. They spoke in measured syllables, letting their words land softly so the air would not ripple. At first, they agreed to simple things. Sleep near it. Listen near it. Measure without touching. The earliest volunteers lay on cots in an adjacent room and let their eyelids droop where the soft machines at their sides made friendly noises. They were told the hum they might feel was only the building's old height. They were told to breathe normally and let dreams unfold without judgment. They were told a great many things that later proved unhelpful. The growls the machines produced were beautiful in the way of weather. Seen from far above, smooth swells, long tides. One researcher stood, head tilted, eyes wet, and always whispered that it looked like an ocean breathing. Another, younger, said it looked like a choir agreeing on a note before the song began. A third left, brittle, and said it looked like nothing he had the language to describe. They all slept very well that first week, if sleep measured by depth, rather than rest, and woke as if surfacing from deep water, reluctant to break the surface, blinking as if light had grown the wedges during the night. The next step was animal. A tired dog from airport court who had learned the art of waging. A son knew a time, belly tight and round, has dealt with the polite exhaustion of motherhood. A line of small animals that made small sounds and looked at the humans with the resigned trust of creatures who have been brought places by people for as long as they have been places. The dog lay down and sighed, post-twitching in little arcs that suggested he was moving somewhere without moving at all. The pate turned on her side and made soft honking noises, contentment, laced with something like wonder. The small animals grew very quiet, the room filled with the sounds of gentle dreams. When the recordings were played back, they did not sound like recordings. They sounded like a room that remembered how it had felt and was, trying in its clumsy electronic way to tell you. A light train came and went, not quite steady. He did not rate the air so much as rate the blood. Uttered something like a melody, unfinished and repetitive the way. A lullaby repeats because repetition is the cradle in which meaning sleeps. If anyone tried to count beats, the counting dissolved into listening. If anyone tried to map what they heard, the mapping grew softer. Edges, then blurred, then turned into the kind of sketch a child makes when drawing a house that means home rather than a house that matches. A plan. They tried to scan it. Lights and coils and particles were brought to the room with great care, carried in a shoulder as if escorted by all the guards. Waves were sent in and returned unclear, reluctant, smudged. Pictures formed and then unformed, curves where corners should be, softness where harmony had been expected. A senior physicist tapped the screen and saw a shape that looked like a bottle, and inside the polar blur as patient and large as a night sky, with no stars. The physicist's mouth trembled. Later, in the quiet of her office, she called her mother and said nothing at all. Just listen to breathing on the other end of the line until sleep took him in sentence. The chamber itself never changed. Its surface was without seam or scratch. Dust approached and then seemed to hesitate, arranging itself in a fingering hand spread the way, as if a soft current rose from the object and lifted mud gently back into the air. When gloved fingers were placed against it, the glove felt warmer. When skin touched it by accident, the skin went cool as river stones, and stayed cool for a long while after. The hum moved through the bones of whomever touched it, a long conversation carrying not through her, but through the scaffolding of the body, from wrist to elbow to shoulder to spine, down into the cradle of the pelvis where old instincts sleep. The staff kept journals. It was encouraged at first and then quietly mandated when patterns he noticed them were better handled in ink than in rumor. The journals filled with drawings of curved interiors, of red light, filtered through tissue, of shadows curled with affectionate shapes. Some wrote in small block letters that never varied. Some wrote long spells of cursive, like water pouring. Many wrote in the middle voice, unsure if they were dreaming or being dreamed. No one drew the outside of the chamber. No one drew the room as the room was. They drew only what they felt inside, as if they had been somewhere, and returned. There were disagreements, though the room seemed to make arguments. Feel heavy, unkind. A junior analyzer proposed that the chamber was a resonant instrument, and the staff a sympathetic body. A biologist suggested that the dreams were a form of cellular memory, something old waking in the genome like a handprint showing up when you breathe on glass. A linguist, pale with sleeplessness she would not admit, recorded fragments of sound in her own voice, each take closer and closer to the humming until the final playback sounded like a flock of doves turning. At once in a damp church, someone else said it felt sacred. Someone else said it felt wrong to use the word of God. They sat with their coffee cooling in their hands and nodded with that agreement. The sound carried peculiar timing. It leaned into dusk and softened to a dawn. It pressed slightly around midday, like the drowse that comes after a one meal and a good story. In the thick black hours it rolled like a great animal shifting in sleep, taking up more space in the imagination than in the air. White noise machines were installed, not so much to mask them as to dress the silence around it, to make it less naked. When the machines were on, the building seemed as When the machines failed, the corridors took only a light stillness of. A nursery when every adult has stepped outside for mom and dada. Single breath inside wakes the chorus. The sound began to behave strangely. She would not eat unless her enclosure door was left open. She noticed the threshold, but did not cross, as if there were an invisible ribbon drawn across the floor that she could not bring herself to tear. When she lay down, she lay in the exact same orientation as the chamber, snout tilted at the same odd angle, legs turned just so. The vet said this was coincidence, and then brought a blanket to fold under her shoulder, and then said nothing else for the rest of the day. The dog, old gentleman that he was, began to dream more intensely. His paws beat small rhythms as if running. His eyes fluttered under closed lids, showing slivers of white that should have looked grotesque but did not. Once, in the small hours, he raised his head and looked at the chamber through the slats of his crate and thumped his tail once, a careful tap as if to say, "I know you." The handler, a woman who had loved many dogs and tried not to count the goodbyes, sat on the floor beside him and wept so quietly she didn't realize until the dog, considerate as ever, put his chin on her knee. When people slept near the chamber, they did not dream alone. The journals, when read together, told a larger story. A shape moved in one person's account and then, a few pages later, turned in another's, as if the narration were being passed between. Hands of a single sleeper restless on a single pillow. Breathing aligned. Heartbeats wandered in an yellow rhythm with a slow, coaxing pulse that had no apparent source and yet made itself alone in every chest that lingered. Even those who swore they never dreamed what with the ache of having been somewhere important and returned without a souvenir. The administration tried to keep distance between bunks. They staggered sleep schedules. They altered meal times and exposure and lighting and access. But patterns shifted around the interventions like water around rocks. For women, eddies downstream. If these sleepers were separated, their dreams met somewhere else. If a team was sent to another wing for a night or two, the hum seemed to travel along with them like the soft sound a mother makes in her thread to tell a fretful child that all is well, that all is well, that all is well. No one called it danger. Not yet. They called it influence. They called it field. They called it any word that made intimacy sound technical. The words helped, for a time. They kept the hands steady and clipped routine, kept the rhythm of the drive from tilting into something sung. A few small things became a habit without being written down. People paused on the threshold and listened. People removed shoes that squeaked and swapped them for shoes that did not. People began to knock softly on the door jamb before entering the hall. You could see in front of the houses when new babies are sleeping. Laughter came softer. The vending machine down the corridor stopped jamming, as if it had learned politeness. The clock on the wall in the observation room drifted a little onwards, not corrected. One evening, leading up, the doors felt like a lake with no ripples. The lights fluttered and settled. The hum lifted in gentle question, then resumed. Those awake felt something pass through them like a flock of tiny birds in the chest, the sensation of many small wings that did not disturb the air yet left behind the tickle of feathers. The channels that night were full of the same image, a hand resting on the curve of a belly, no pushing, only acknowledging. A hand that could be anyone's, a hand that could be everyone's. The next morning tasted of sleep. The coffee was better than usual, or perhaps everyone drank more. chamber was unchanged. Of course it was unchanged. That is how it behaved. It was the rest of the room that shifted its weight from foot to foot. Polite, attentive, pretending not to notice when the floor seemed to breathe. They spoke, that afternoon, about boundaries. A senior researcher with a voice like a lapel center would define a radius and honor it. A junior with sharp eyebrows asked how one draws a line around what moves through the body. A pragmatic technician proposed colored tape. Someone fetched a roll from a drawer and tore a strip and set it gently on the ground in a wide square. No one stepped over it without pausing. No one could say why the pause mattered, only that it did. Tests continued. Measurements accumulated. Attempts to see inside returned with the same sweet reluctance, as if the interior was shy of being known that way. The hum remained constant and not constant, like a heartbeat that has taken a vow of patience. The staff learned, without deciding to, the art of putting themselves down carefully, as if they were heavy objects on a thin shelf. They learned to listen for their own breath and the breath beneath it. They learned to trust that a cradle can hold more than it seems, and that sometimes not knowing is a kind of courtesy one extends to a sleeping house. No one said out loud what began in the quiet mirror of the crypt to feel true, that the chamber was not an object sitting in a room, but a room the rest of the building had been constructed within by mistake. That they were not surrounding it, it was surrounding them. That they were guests who had wandered into a nursery and were doing their best to deserve the invitation. And yet, below the kindness and the wonder, another current moved. It was not fear. Not exactly. It was the memory of fear, learned long ago and kept for emergencies. It lay folded like a blanket at the foot of a bed. It lay waiting for someone to say the word that would unfold it. Someone would say it soon. It began, as many things do, in the middle of the night. The building was quiet. The halls seemed to breathe softly, like a sleeper adjusting under a blanket. The white noise machines hummed along with the fluorescent lights. A steady backdrop to the silence that filled every unoccupied corner. Then, one of the machines faltered. Just for breath, a hiccup, a flicker. The sound guttered and failed. The silence that replaced it was not empty, but full, as if something long patient had been waiting for the curtain to fall. Those awake felt it first in their teeth, a low vibration that trembled through the jawbone, humming faintly in the skull. It did not feel like sound. It felt like remembering a song you had not yet learned. Those asleep went deeper. The nurse on watch looked up to see every sleeper in the whole shift, and once, as though responding to an unseen conductor, eyelids fluttered, hands, legs, bodies tilted their heads in the same gentle rhythm. She called for backup, her voice a harsh intrusion that seemed to bounce against the walls and fall to the floor. No one answered. The intercom buzzed faintly, then hissed, then went quiet. One by one, the sleepers began to murmur. Not words, not language. The sounds were small and soft, like infants stirring in dream. Syllables without meaning, overlapping, cooing, hushing. It was a chorus of mouths whispering not to the air, but into the bones of the room itself. When the nurse stepped forward to rouse them, one of the researchers convulsed. His chest swelled, rising far too high, ribs bending in shapes that ribs should not make. He gasped and expelled a stream of liquid clear as glass, soaking the floor in a puddle that smelled faintly of salt and iron. nurse froze. She knew the smell. Every mother knows it. Every doctor who has stood at a bed knows it. It was amniotic fluid. The others did not wake. They swayed in unison and shed, lips moving in the lullaby that did not end. Their voices layered into something almost beautiful, too beautiful. And beneath it came the vibration, not louder now, but closer, as if the walls themselves had lungs, as if the entire building was inhaling around them. The nurse tried to shake them, tried to shout their names, but their bodies resisted, limbs heavy as if they belonged not to themselves, but to something larger. Her panic grew into fury, her throat full with shouting. Still no one stirred. When the medical team finally arrived, the lullaby snapped off. The sleepers collapsed into stillness, breathing shallow but steady. Those who had vomited fluid coughed faintly, lungs straining, but survived. When asked later what they remembered, none could answer. Their faces were calm, even serene, as though they had woken from a dream too good to describe. But in the journals that morning, every hand read the same image. A chamber not of stone, but of living tissue. Moist walls, warm and pulsing. And in the depths of the red darkness, something fast turning over in its sleep, the lullaby spilling from its unseen mouth. The word that appeared, scrawled again and again, was simple. Born. That day, a security officer took his service weapon and landed himself in the mess hall. He left no note, only a single word carved into the skin of his palm with the edge of a fork. That same word, born. They tried to keep everything written, contained in ink and paper, as if documentation could make sense of what had happened. Yet the accounts refused to stay clinical. They slipped, each time, into the cadence of confession. The first was taken from a young researcher, pale and trembling, eyes bloodshot with exhaustion. She sat at the interview table with her hands flat, palms sweating, as though pressing herself into the wood might anchor her. It's always the same dream, she whispered. I am floating. I can't move, but it doesn't feel like paralysis. It feels right. It feels like I'm supposed to stay still. The air's warm and wet. I could hear something, not outside, but inside me. It's like I'm humming, but I'm not. I'm just carrying the sound, passing it along. I think we all are. When pressed to describe what she saw, her face twisted, both reverent and horrified. There are shapes around me, cold, twitching, hundreds, I think, maybe more. Some are small, like infants. Some are so large I can't see their edges. When they breathe, I breathe. When they move, I move. And when I wake, my chest hurts as though I'm beholding my breath. For hers. She grew quiet, then leaned forward, whispering as if afraid to wake. Something even in memory. Doctor, it's not waiting to be born. It already is. We are the ones inside it. We had the dream. Another account came from a technician, older, gruff, the kind of man who had spent his career with machines rather than mysteries. He clenched his jaw when asked about the dreams, refusing to meet the interviewer's eyes. I hear it when I'm awake now. Low. Patient. Always just under whatever else is happening. Sometimes it matches the rhythm of my heart. Sometimes it doesn't, and I feel like I'm failing to keep up. I try to hum along, but my throat loosens like it doesn't want me to. If tapped his temples with shaking hands. Asterisk, I used to think it was a thing, you know, some box artifact contained. But now, asterisk, he trailed off, his breathing ragged. Now I think it's a room. And the rest of this place, this whole site, maybe the world itself, maybe that's what's inside. There was also the testimony of a security guard, a woman whose voice cracked when she spoke. She stared at the floor as though afraid to see the faces around her. I was on patrol. I passed the containment hall. I swear, the door was breathing, not literally moving, but you could feel it. Out. Like the whole frame was alive. I stood there with my hand on my sidearm, and I couldn't tell if I wanted to use it or if I was holding on to it the way a child holds a blanket. Her voice grew softer. I used to want children. Now I don't you know, because every time I close my eyes, I feel like I've already had them, like I'm carrying them, but they're not mine. They belong to it. The interview ended with her sobbing quietly into her palms, whispering through tears, I don't want to be someone's dream. I don't want to be someone's one. All these accounts were catalogued, failed, locked away, but the words seeped through the walls like damp. No one needed to read them to know what they said. Everyone was already dreaming the same things, and every night more joined the chorus. The valley itself began to dream. It started small, easy to dismiss. A farmer in the next town over reportedly escaped restless, lowing at what else, then collapsing in silence. A child woke shrieking, clutching her belly, crying at the babies. As women dug out until their throats bled, then lay down as if soothed, tails thumping weakly in rhythm with some unheard lullaby. Inside the sight, the hum grew bolder. It was no longer just a pause beneath silence that threaded through. Conversation, through footsteps, through the faint clatter of utensils. In the mess hall, people began pausing mid-sentence, heads tilted, as though listening to a voice only they could hear. The dreams were no longer confined to those who slept with the night. Walls. Reports filtered in from nearby towns, synchronized nightmares of red, chambers of fluid and twitching shadows of breathing not one's home. Pregnant women described sensations of unfamiliar movements within them. Is there something more than one heartbeat drum beneath the skin? Children began to sing. At first it was nonsense humming, fragments of lullabies in their known language. Then it became unified, multiple voices rising together, strangers, across the valley chanting the same haunting tune. Parents tried to hush them, to comfort them, but the children looked at their mothers with wide, glassy eyes and whispered, "We are not alone. We will not dream alone." Within the facility, containment measures frayed. White noise machines cracked and burned out, the circuits corroded by some unseen resonance. Sleeping quarters grew unsafe as entire wings of personnel enter and sleep simultaneously, their bodies twitching in unison, lips whispering together as if rehearsed. Guards attempted to stagger schedules, but it no longer mattered. Sleep came when it wanted, heavy and absolute. One evening, the power flickered across the entire site. The emergency generators engaged, but the hum swelled louder than the whir of engines. The walls themselves seemed to pulse. The floors vibrated like a giant heartbeat. Several staff dropped to their knees, clutching their ears, crying not in pain, but in recognition, as if they had been waiting the whole lives to hear the sound. The monitoring systems beeped for they failed. sine waves from dozens of individuals across the same line into a single waveform, not merely similar but identical, pulsing with impossible precision. Analysts stared at the graphs in silence. The lines looked less like human minds than the steady signal of a transmitter. The valley outside mirrored the change. Birds vanished. Not one feather remained on the ground. Frogs in the reservoir bleated, then stilled. The air itself carried a damp warmth, as though one breathed inside, lungs too vast to comprehend. Researchers tried to classify it. Was this infection? Was it psychic contagion? A field, a signal, a resonance. The words failed them, slipped away the moment they tried to define. What was happening no longer felt like something spreading it, felt like something waking. Tongue shifted to rhythm. The rhythm bent into words. They came through the walls, through the soil, through the blood that moved on the skin. Do not wake us. Do not let us dream alone. Some begged to terminate the object, though no one could explain how. Drills, explosives, even thoughts of fire were useless or unthinkable. Others argued termination was not only impossible, but dangerous and insult to something older than language. A few, eyes went with something that looked like joy, whispered that perhaps it should be allowed to finish. By now, the chamber no longer felt contained. Containment was a word made for cages, for logs, for glass cases. This was not contained. This was cradled. And all of them, every person in the valley, were being robbed to sleep inside it. They found the no quarters 2 nights after she vanished. The bed was neatly made, though no one remembered her ever making it. A lamp glowed, still warm, though the bulb had already burned itself to a faint black smudge. On the desk, the journal lay open and not yet dry. It was written in a steady hand and hurried, like someone finally admitting what they had known for a long time. I do not know if I am writing this for myself or for anyone else. Perhaps I am writing it to the thing in the walls, and if so, Tenet already knows what I am saying. For weeks I told myself this was just another anomaly, another object, another line in a report. I thought I could study it as I have studied all the others observe. Measure, classify. But this is not an object. It is not a chamber at all. It is a place. It is a presence. It is a whim, yes, but not for one, for all, for everything. When I close my eyes, I am not myself. I am smaller. I am cold and waiting. I hear the heartbeat, the lullaby, and it feels like home. I think it remembers me. I think it remembers all of us. We call it an anomaly because we cannot admit that we are the anomaly. The interruption, the intruders lying in someone else's cradle. The dreams are not visions. They are memories. Old ones. The kind carried not in mind but in marrow. Every soul remembers where it began. Every breath we take, every pulse in our veins, echoes what it gave us. That is why it feels familiar. Because it is. Because we were never outside of it. We have always been inside. The others argue about danger. They debate if it can be destroyed. They speak of containment and termination as if those words have any weight here. They do not understand. We are not the ones containing it. It is containing us. It is keeping us safe, asleep, so it does not have to dream alone. But I feel it stirring. The hum is faster now. The rhythm is urgent. It is not asking anymore. It is tired of waiting. It is tired of carrying us. It wants to wake. And when it wakes, I do not know if we wake with it or if we vanish. Inside it forever. He should be afraid. I tell myself I should be afraid. But I am not. You feel calm. You feel ready. I feel like a child pressing its face into the hollow of its mother's chest, knowing only warmth and habit. Perhaps fear is only what we feel when we forget where we came from. If anyone finds this, know that I went willingly. Not into death, not into escape, into return. Because all wounds are temporary. And this one is about to end. Her shoes were found by the door. Her keycard was left on the desk. No trace of her was ever discovered within the facility. Yet on the night she disappeared, dozens of staff swore they found her, and brushed across their shoulder as they slept, gentle, familiar, and impossibly large. And in the silence after, the hum beat faster. The facility was closed under the excuse of contamination. The valley was marked off with wire fences, hazard signs, and the polite lies of bureaucrats. Papers spoke of groundwater gone bad, of soil too toxic to sustain life. Farmers were moved. The small towns grew quieter, and then they, too, thinned away. The chamber remained. No one spoke of transporting it again. No one tried to destroy it. The orders simply said, seal, abandon, forget, and yet forgetting proved impossible. The silence around the valley grew heavy, like a curtain drawn over. Creep. Those who had worked there never slept quite the same. Some woke in the night gasping, ears full of a sound they could not place until they pressed their hand to their chest and realized it was their own heart mimicking the hum. Others found themselves humming lullabies they did not know melodies. That dissolved the moment they tried to write them down. Pregnant women in towns many miles away reported strange dreams, the sensation of being more than one body at once. Children always whispered about red rooms and walls that breathed. A few took to traveling back to the perimeter fences, backing down, crossing silence, staring into the valley as they're waiting for something to stir. They never said why. They only sat, breathing slowly, as if keeping time with the ground itself. And the valley listened. The air there is different now. Heavy. Warm. If you stand long enough at the edge of the fence, you may hear it. Not loud, not intrusive, but certain. A vibration below the soil, below the water, below the ponds. A high beat too large to belong to anything you can name. The lullaby has not stopped. It continues, steady, patient, softer than breath, deeper than silence. It waits in the dark like something cold and dreaming, content only, so long as the world sleeps with it. And those who remember know what comes next. They know what it means when the arm grows weaker, when the rhythm leans forward like a body preparing to rise from a bed. Because all wounds are temporary, and sooner or later, every dreamer must wake. Gentle, soothing, pulling the listener back from the dark. Thank you for watching YugMythos. If you felt the hum beneath your skin tonight, you are not alone. There are more stories waiting for you here, more whispers, more shadows that remember your name. So, if you wish to return, subscribe to YugMythos, leave a comment, share what you dreamed of while you listened. And remember, silence